You'd think a country drowning in violent crime would let good people defend themselves. Venezuela did the opposite. It banned civilian gun sales, froze new licenses, and now basically says only the state should have weapons. While gangs and political enforcers are still very much armed, good people are the ones caught in the middle. Stay with me until chapter 5, because that's where the government-backed armed groups show up. Now here's a quick disclaimer. Most of what I'm quoting comes from the Venezuelan Violence Observatory, human rights reports, and the text of the disarmament law itself, not government press releases. I'm not a Venezuelan lawyer. This is an educational overview, not legal advice. Laws change, enforcement is political, and Venezuela is unstable as hell. Chapter 1. How Venezuela was disarmed. Venezuela didn't just wake up one morning and ban guns. The idea that the state should hold all weapons has been baked into the country for over a century. As far back as the early 1900s under dictator Juan Vicente Gómez, the government issued disarmament decrees telling civilians to turn in their weapons. Machetes and basic hunting shotguns were tolerated, but modern firearms were supposed to be in government hands. The official reason was always the same: reduce crime, restore order. But the real effect was simple: disarm potential political opposition. For 100 years, this pattern stuck. Older arms laws kept tight control over who could legally own guns. Hunting and sport shooting could exist in controlled environments, but a culture of everyone keeps a firearm at home never took root like it did in other countries. Fast forward into the Bolivarian era under Chavez and later Maduro, and the laws tighten. The state leans into heavy, centralized model where guns are perfectly acceptable in the hands of military, the police, and loyalist groups, but still not in the hands of ordinary people. Meanwhile, violent crime exploded. Estimates ran into the millions of guns in circulation, most illegal. So the government took that chaos and used it as more justification to do what strong states always want to do: fix crime by further disarming the population. That history sets up everything that comes next. Chapter 2. Venezuela gun laws on paper. The main modern gun law is Law for Disarmament and Control of Arms and Ammunition, passed in 2013. This law is still the core framework as of 2025, with the government layering policies and bans on top of this structure. What does the law do? Well, 1, it gives the state control over possession, carry, manufacture, import, sale, storage, transport of firearms, ammo, parts, and accessories. And 2, it centralizes licensing and registration in the hands of the Armed Forces' Weapons Control Authority. And 3, it creates a legal basis for permanent disarmament bans. That's confiscations, voluntary turn-ins, destruction of seized weapons. Starting in 2012, the government banned private commercial sales of guns and ammo to civilians, and by 2013, they'd basically frozen new license under the disarmament law. Later, they went further and banned carrying firearms in public spaces entirely. So if you look only at the text, you'll see permits for home possession, permits for carrying special risk cases, permits for hunting, sport, and collection of antiques and whatnot. But here's the catch. The system that's supposed to issue those permits to ordinary citizens has been frozen for over a decade. On paper, there's a structure. In practice, the door is locked. And this is where the law on paper completely divorces from how people actually live. Chapter 3. How to legally get a gun in Venezuela. Or not. Now we need to split this into 2 worlds. 1, the on-paper world the law describes. And 2, the reality Venezuelans actually live in. So let's start with what it says on paper. If you go strictly by the law and the regulations, to qualify for a firearm permit, a person is supposed to be Venezuelan, be at least 25 years old, have no criminal record, provide official ID and proof of residence, be registered for tax purposes, pass a medical and psychological evaluation, and comply with any training or administrative requirements set by the Defense Ministry and the Arms Control Authority. The law then lays out 4 different permit categories. First is the home possession permit. That's 1 gun stored at your residence for protection, usually valid for a limited period before renewal. The next would be a carry permit for personal defense. in theory possible, but only if you can prove a serious specific risk. For example, you're a jeweler or a politician. And the other is sporting and hunting permits for registered club members, competitive shooters, and licensed hunters. And the last is permits for private security and armored transport companies. That's heavily regulated and tied to corporate authorization. Alright, so on paper, if you just read the statute, you could come away thinking, alright, this is strict, but there's a clear legal path to own a gun if you jump through a bunch of hoops. But see, that's where reality hits. Multiple independent overviews up to 2024 and 2025 say the same thing. Venezuela is classified as very restrictive, some might say oppressive. No new civilian firearms licenses have believed to have been issued since around 2013. Please comment below if you have or know of someone who has one. And private sales of guns and ammo remain banned. Penalties for unlicensed possession have been made extremely harsh. Now, at the same time, the government runs public disarmament campaigns, encouraging citizens to hand over guns, destroying seized weapons publicly, promoting the idea that only the state should be armed through multiple channels and propaganda. So who still has legal guns? Well, the military, the police, certain state-approved private security outfits, which we get into in Chapter 5, so hold on, cause that's a wild one, and possibly a small number of legacy sporting or hunting owners whose weapons were already licensed. If you're just an ordinary Venezuelan citizen in 2025, the realistic answer to, how do I get a gun legally, is you don't. So what do people do when the legal door is welded shut, but violence doesn't stop? That's where Venezuela's self-defense law and reality collide. Chapter 4. Venezuela's self-defense law. Legal on paper, impossible in practice. Venezuela's penal code recognizes legitimate self-defense as a situation where a person is not criminally punishable. The basic rules for self-defense in Venezuela look a lot like other civil law countries. In simple terms, there has to be an unjust, current, or imminent attack. The force you use to stop it has to be necessary and proportional to that threat, and you can't be the one who started the fight. If those conditions are met, a killing or injury can be treated as lawful self-defense instead of a crime. On top of that, the law recognizes excess in self-defense. That's if someone goes further than what the law considers necessary, but does it in fear, confusion, or shock during a real attack. The act may not be fully justified, but the penalties can be reduced instead of hitting them with the maximum punishment. So on paper, Venezuela still says, yes, you can defend yourself or defend others against a real attack. Here's the problem. That legal theory collides with the gun ban reality. If you use a firearm in self-defense, you now have two separate issues. One, was the shooting itself justified under the self-defense rules? And two, was the possession of that gun legal in the first place? If your gun is unlicensed, and for most civilians it would be, then you might successfully argue that the shooting was self-defense, but still face serious charges just for having the weapon. On top of that, Venezuela's judiciary is not known for being neutral or apolitical. Reports from international observers hit the same notes. Due process problems, political pressure, and selective enforcement. Alright, here's a hypothetical to explain all of this. Imagine one of the few people who actually does have a legal hunting gun in Venezuela. He's licensed, his shotgun is on the books, and one night a robber kicks in his door holding a machete. He grabs the hunting gun, fires, and the attacker dies. On paper, the penal code lets him argue classic self-defense. There was a real attack, he used the tool he had, and he wasn't the aggressor. The fact that the gun itself is legal removes one big problem, illegal possession. But it doesn't guarantee he walks free. In the real Venezuela, he's still betting his future on whether the police, the prosecutor, and the politicized court decide to see if it is legitimate self-defense or as a convenient excuse to make an example out of a civilian who dare pull the trigger. Comment to A below if you believe defending yourself with a firearm is as much a right for you as it is for your elected officials. Chapter 5. Reality of Venezuela gun bans. So what actually happened after the disarmament push? Did the guns disappear? No. Venezuela still has huge numbers of firearms in circulation, especially in the hands of criminal gangs, organized crime networks, and armed civilians aligned with the government, often called colectivos. These groups can be heavily armed. Colectivos didn't get their AKs from a sporting goods store. Over the years, Venezuelan state has treated them like an unofficial armed wing of the revolution, hooking them up with rifles, radios, motorcycles, and training. On top of that, many colectivos finance themselves through extortion and black market crime, which gives them another pipeline to illegal weapons. From a self-defense and civil liberties perspective, it's basically the worst of both worlds. Seems the only people not armed are the good people. Now, are there any lessons we can learn from all of this? Chapter 6. Lessons from Venezuela. Venezuela isn't just a strict gun law story. It's a numbers story, and the numbers are still ugly. In 2024, the Venezuelan Violence Observatory estimated around 27 violent deaths per 100,000 people. A decade ago, it was pushing around an insane 92 per 100K. I mean, yes, that's a drop, but 27 is still several times higher than what most of the world lives with, which is around 8 per 100K. And even that improvement comes with an asterisk. Since about 2014, roughly a quarter of the population has fled the country, including criminals. That's 8 million people gone. Less people means lower numbers. That doesn't mean the state suddenly learned how to protect anyone. The bigger lesson is how crime, collapse, and control lock together. The economy falls apart, institutions rot, violence explodes, and the government's answer is, give us more power and we'll fix it. In practice, that means centralizing weapons in state and loyalist hands while never delivering safety in return. The last piece is information. Official stats are limited or unreliable, so you have to rely on independent groups just to guess what's actually happening. When you can't trust the numbers, it's easy for whoever holds power to say, relax, things are getting better. Don't worry about the guns. So if you're watching this from a freer country, the takeaway isn't just they banned guns. It's this: when a government is broke, corrupt, and scared, tighter control stops being about protecting you and it starts being about protecting themselves. If you carry a gun in America, hit the links below. We make concealed carry sweatpants, everyday carry athletic shorts, and more. Or visit relaxfittactical.com to see the whole lineup. Drop a comment if you personally know anyone in Venezuela who has a current legal gun license. I want to see if it's actually happening anywhere. Hit that like, hit that bell, and don't be lame, subscribe.